Tomorrowland Transit Authority Metroliner nonstop, now departing Rocket Tower Plaza Station for a round-trip Super Skyway tour.
I'm not sponging for rum. It be gold I'm after.
Howdy, folks. Please keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the train and remain seated at all times.
WDW Radio, your information station.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the WDW Radio Show, your Walt Disney World information station. I'm your host, Lou Mangello, and this is show number 668, and together we're going to celebrate the magic of the Disney parks, movies, and more here on the podcast, my weekly live video on Facebook every Wednesday night, the community, books, audio tours, blog, and more. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and you can find everything else at WDWRadio.com. So we're going to continue our look at Tomorrowland in Walt Disney World this week and focus on where the land, metaphorically, is now and where it may or may not be going, as we do some armchair Imagineering of our own before looking to you for your opinion and ideas. I'll then have our Disney Trivia Question of the Week, your voicemails, and more updates at the end of the show. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show.
Alien Encounter was considered an e-ticket. The Timekeeper at that point in time was an e-ticket. Space Mountain was an e-ticket. The Astro Orbiter was an e-ticket. I mean, most of what was going on in those, what was considered the prime attractions of that park, were happening in Tomorrowland.
Yeah, and even sort of fast forwarding not very long, it closes in 2003, and I know we're not going to go sort of attraction specific, but I think this is an interesting one to sort of touch on a little bit. When it closes in 2003, it is, this convention center is now rethemed and renamed as a Galactic Federation Prisoner Teleportation Center. And instead of being XS Tech, it's now Stitch's Great Escape. A couple of things happen. We go from this, here is a vision of a potential futuristic community, to now here's a potential futuristic community where we are talking about aliens and all these things. And one, we're tying it to IP, which didn't really happen. Remember, Alien Encounter did not use any movie-based IP. Timekeeper was created for the Disney parks. There was no overlay in Space Mountain. So all of a sudden now you're bringing in IP, and I think you're starting to make that switch to, one, now there's a prison. Now your community has a prison, which is really interesting, but a little bit more of, well, we're going to sort of touch back on that weird and campy and pulpy sort of 50s type inspiration.
Yeah, I think maybe the kind of pivot starts to happen with Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin, because I will admit I've always kind of been slightly confused by the Buzz Light. Is that the cartoon, or is that the Buzz? It's not Buzz the toy, so it kind of lines up with the cartoon. And then now with Lightyear coming out, we've learned that I hope that I'm understanding this correctly, because I have seen so many people give so many different versions of what's going on here with the storyline. But I guess I equate Lightyear to being kind of like Iron Man, the movie, in our universe. Mm-hmm. And then you make an Iron Man toy, and that's the Buzz Lightyear of Toy Story. And you make an Iron Man cartoon for Disney XD, and that's the Buzz Lightyear cartoon. So, assuming that that's all correct, I'm not sure I totally ever really I mean, I love Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin, but I don't really totally get how that fit in with Tomorrowland, because, if are we the toy, then we're shrunk down to that size, or are we the cartoon? And I guess that kind of fits, but with that pivot with Buzz Lightyear, you start to see, like you say, you have Stitch, and it's no longer the convention center. And then the TTA narration changes to where they're no longer talking about the spaceport anymore. They're literally talking to you about attractions. Mm-hmm. Like, you can ride Space Mountain, you can stop in and see Stitch, you can go be a space ranger, instead of what really felt like, you had like a traffic report mm-hmm. on the, the People Mover narration. You had stuff about getting a pizza from Earthcrust Pizza. Like, those little changes really made a difference in whether or not that felt like an immersive place that you were visiting versus a land with attractions.
Right. And I think you're right. I think this sort of marks the beginning of, again, hindsight being 2020, that shift starting to happen. But I wonder too, how many guests understood exactly what was happening in Tomorrowland. How many guests walked over to the side of a building to look at the Leonard Burdenstar poster, see that it's the convention center or the expo center, and start to realize that these places are a place in a fanciful, fictional, yet potentially kind of real world future. And all those things start to sort of snowball on top of each other, right? Even going from If You Had Wings to Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin. If You Had Wings certainly didn't fit. Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin, I don't think anybody's getting that it's supposed to be like a police force or like a law enforcement force of the land. So you might put certain signage. You can call something, Rocket Tower Plaza and Lunching Pad and the Space Bar, and it doesn't necessarily click for guests when they come in that is a real place that they were entering. And I don't know if it's because of signage, because of messaging, because of transition points in and out of Tomorrowland, or just a culmination of all of these things. I don't want to say mismatch and tried to be forced together, but it looks great. Like when you write it down and you talk about all those places and what they are, like, oh, it all makes sense, what these different buildings and attractions are. But I wonder how many guests walking in really sort of understood that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, looking back, like I said, as a kid, like it really did feel like I had gone somewhere else. And I don't get the same feeling when I walk into Tomorrowland today that I did then. But is that because there's no longer a narration? Is that because there's not signs? Is it because of the attractions? Like what best conveys that message to guests? Is it the facades of the building, or does it require all of these things? Because, since the late 90s, the attractions haven't changed that much. But clearly you're getting a different vibe or a different feel from it than you did then.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings, and I think it's applicable not just in Disney but in business, whether you own a website or brick and mortar store, and I think it's a brilliant Michael Eisnerism that everything speaks, right? Everything tells a story. Everything has to sort of make sense, and again, applicable to any business. That everything that you do, every piece of work, everything you put out, is a reflection on something. I wonder if all the things that were meant to speak in Tomorrowland, excuse me, spoke loud enough. And what I mean by that is, still to this day, you'll walk in and you'll see that even the plants, even the fake plants, as you go by Tomorrowland, there are these metallic palm trees that have metallic fronds, and one is closed and all the other ones open. They have these little, what looks like metallic coconuts dangling. Those are meant to be like solar energy collectors, because the Space Mountain post-show area, was supposed to be the Tomorrowland Power and Light Company. It's supposed to be things that help to power Tomorrowland. I'm not sure anybody ever walked up to those and go, oh, I get it. These things are collecting energy, and that's why the Tomorrowland Power and Light Company is right there, and all these things sort of make sense. I think there was a disjointedness of the overall narrative of tomorrow, and it remains obviously to this day, I think even more so, to the overall narrative of Tomorrowland.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit I was one who, until I listened to your audio guide, I didn't know that's what the purpose of those were. I thought, oh, they're spacey trees. Like, those are cool. And I thought, I literally thought, well, I remember one time looking at them thinking, well, are those solar powered? Do they open? I thought, well, maybe.
Really yeah.
Well, no, I thought, well, does the power of the sun cause the fronds to open? And then if I come back at nighttime, is it closed up? Because there was the one that was closed. So I thought, well, maybe that one's just broke. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it gives you kind of a futuristic environment, but yeah, I mean, unless there's a sign there telling someone and then they actually stop to read the sign, that's not really part of the story that they're getting.
I think even when forget signs, I think even when there's more than signage, like video, people still didn't get it. What am I referring to? Sorry. 1994, FedEx takes over the sponsorship of Space Mountain. All that post-show Ryko 1 for RCA goes away. Now in the pre-show area, do you remember Space Mountain TV, SMTV, which was the idea was that you were watching TV that would be on the air in this futuristic community. Charles Fleischer, the voice of Roger Rabbit, was Crazy Larry. He was a used satellite dealer. Glenn Shaddix, who was Otho from Beetlejuice, was a Ray Cathode, who was hosting the Mars fashion show. Mario Lopez from Saved by the Bell was in there as sort of a host. But I don't know if anybody watched it and went, oh, I get it. This is TV that people who are living in this community are getting. In hindsight, all the signs, literal and figurative, were there, but I don't know that any guest walked out and go, I get it. This is meant to be this real sort of community of the future, as opposed to here's a bunch of connected themed attractions, but unlike Liberty Square or Frontierland, it is meant to be a space and place of real community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember the pre-show, and again, I was younger the first time I saw it, and I just my one memory of it is, well, that those people were loud. Because it was like that car salesman type ad. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a good, an interesting place to pivot towards the future toward the present, because there's just kind of this almost gradual decline of what was kind of at its peak there at 94, and then things just start to kind of fade away.
Mm-hmm. And I think now, especially in this somewhat odd, lengthy transitory period, as the Tomorrowland arcade goes away, Tron Light Cycle Power Run is coming in, the Galaxy Palace Theater is now an empty space. It's just a wall where the old theater used to be. You do sort of, I think that progression towards moving away from trying to convince guests that there is a storyline going on here has gone on. And I think that happens in a lot of places, not necessarily intentionally, but sometimes for one reason or another, the deep stories that are crafted for attractions and lands are lost as Imagineers leave, cast members change over, new things come in, and some things are replaced, which is a shame, because I've said for years, I wish there was sort of this great big book of Imagineering that if you wanted to, you could go to and see what these overarching storylines could be. I think now, as Disney continues to move towards your mobile device being a centric part of your experience, I wonder if you're able to layer on more of those stories, but we'll get to that as we talk about the future. But I do think right now, Kendall, and as we're recording this in January of 2022, where one of these buildings still sits empty, I wonder what the future of the Monsters Inc. laugh floor is going to be. Tron is being constructed, and I think that there's a sense of opportunity, but I certainly don't feel like Tomorrowland has that. Look, they've even, for whatever reason, they've removed some of the storytelling elements. They've removed the Robo Newsboy. They removed that futuristic phone booth that I love taking people over to, because nobody ever walked up to it. Nobody ever hit the buttons and listened to all the different phone messages that were on there. They were fun and they were funny, and they again helped sort of connect the macro dots. But as those small things get taken away, it's representative of a larger shift away from that 1994 storyline.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the most obvious transition that happened with that was the removal of the Tomorrowland sign and the replacement with the new, very streamlined, very clean, but also still calling back to the, the white, I'm thinking the way that the signs looked at if you had wings, and the way that signage was, and just kind of taking removing that, the way that the Astro Orbiter looks. I wonder how long will the Astro Orbiter continue to look the way that it does now, or will it be receiving some type of change to match this, this sleek Apple IKEA looking version of the future? And not that that's a bad thing. I mean, you think about the way that Tron Light Cycle Power Run looks in Beijing, and it's very kinetic in a very smooth way. And I think we're kind of seeing that transition happen, and that maybe that's where some of, those elements, the removal of some of the items you mentioned, and moving towards this simplified retro future look.
Yeah, and I said a few years ago, I think I did on an end of the year show, that I predicted that Tomorrowland as a whole, not individual attractions, Tomorrowland as a whole was prime and ripe and ready, and the handwriting in my feeling was on the wall that Tomorrowland was about to get a major facelift. And I still believe that. I believe that actually it probably has been something that's been in the works, possibly for a while. Obviously, the shutting down of the world has changed the timelines for everything. Excuse me. But to your point, Tron Light Cycle Power Run, and yes, it does sort of sit off in the corner and not necessarily within the sight lines of walking in, but that pairs up nicely with that very sleek, clean, modern Tomorrowland entrance arch, and it's everything in between that doesn't necessarily mesh together. I think those, almost as bookends to the land, are indicators that there is a refreshing of this land that is forthcoming. Because when you look at it from a 30,000-foot view and see these other attractions and buildings and even retail that hasn't really been touched or updated in years, especially with so many other lands getting some of that attention, I still believe in my little heart of hearts that in the very near future, no pun intended, Tomorrowland is going to get a relatively radical update that will make it a much more cohesive storytelling narrative.
Well, and it is kind of interesting too to go, to call back to what we were talking about toward the beginning of the show, of this dilemma of having to fight the future on two fronts in Florida. Now they've, it's no longer Future World. Mm-hmm. And not that the front of Epcot won't still look modern. I mean, the new lighting package on Spaceship Earth, the lighting, the side lighting, the neon on the sides and everything, it still has a very optimistic future look to it. But they've removed that verbiage, and, they're moving to those world communities. So now are they just going to fight the future on one front in Tomorrowland, or will there be kind of, I don't know what you pivot to exactly, because like I said, like Tron Light Cycle Power Run seems very futuristic just from the way that it looks, and also in concept. To bring in a very popular word of the day, Tron is like the literal epitome of the metaverse.
Yeah.
I mean, and how much have we heard lately discussions of Disney and the metaverse? Like, obviously that's, Tron is still a thing of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if Tomorrowland is finally going to get to be Tomorrowland, just in maybe a different way than the spacey Tomorrowland we had of 1955.
Right. It's got to find a way to negate the inherent problem in the name, which is the representation of tomorrow when Tomorrowland is happening faster, right? The idea that technology used to double every 7 years is incredibly shorter. It's an incredibly shorter period of time now, which is why Carousel of Progress's final scene could never represent the future, because the second that you start putting in AR, VR, meta stuff now, it's going to be outdated by the time the attraction's finished. What has been happening over the last few years that I think some guests, some love for different reasons and some don't, is, and I'm using a very broad stroke of the brush here, but the Pixarification of the land, or, well, Tomorrowland is where attractions go if we can't figure out where else to put them, right? If there's no more room at Hollywood Studios, there's nothing left in Magic Kingdom, we'll just put it in Tomorrowland. We'll put a sort of spacey theme on it, and we will make it fit. What does this next iteration look like? Is it meant to be this future world-ish proving ground of next-gen technology? Is it this optimistic, futuristic type view? Is it meant to sort of, does it merge this fanciful view of the future with the Epcot city planning solutions of the future and sort of blend that into some sort of modified version of this being a futuristic community? Is this, do you sort of look to some sort of, and I don't think this is the direction that they go, this utopian type community using realistic future technology blended with a little bit of, fantasy and sci-fi? There's a lot of sort of competing and conflicting, I don't want to say, there's a lot of completing and conflicting ideas that are in Tomorrowland now, and you wonder what gets embraced and what gets removed as we sort of move to the next phase. And I'm almost sort of using Tron Light Cycle Power Run as that foundation, because it is it's going to be the new bright shiny object for a long, long time. I don't know that you can sort of retrofit that into the story of this being a realistic vision of the future. So is it fantasy? Is it steampunk? Is it pulpy? Is it utopianism? Like, where do all these things, and how do you sort of marry that with IP? How do all those things come together?
Yeah, I mean, I think you also have to think about too, like, we're coming at this from the perspective of people who have visited Walt Disney World for 25 years, 50 years, and are heavily invested in this. But what is the average guest's perception of Magic Kingdom? What are they expecting to see when they walk in those gates? Like, are they expecting to see true stories? Are they expecting to see something they've never seen before, like something new, fascinating, top technology? Are they expecting, to be immersed in what they know, Disney films? Are they all of the above? I mean, obviously there are some true stories, like you mentioned, that are told in Liberty Square and in Frontierland. Although I would say probably out of all the things I mentioned, maybe that's what people expect the least when they come to Magic Kingdom. I mean, I think if you're looking for a true story, most people would, the average guest would probably expect to see that at Epcot. I think the average guest walking into the Magic Kingdom is expecting to see something fantasy. With that, like, or maybe I shouldn't say fantasy, but like that Hollywood version of reality. Like, you have the Hello Dolly version of Main Street, the Main Street of America. You have this satirical, cheeky version of exploring and adventure, and you kind of have, How the West Was Fun in Frontierland, and like really the only really true thing you have right now is Hall of Presidents, and sadly, a lot of guests walking in there don't do Hall of Presidents. So it's kind of interesting that you're not necessarily looking for that real future. So when I said that earlier of like maybe Tomorrowland finally gets to be Tomorrowland, maybe it gets to be like, that the optimism of what could be, but maybe never will be. Mm-hmm. And, this idea Walt had of not a utopia, because that sounds, I don't know, but just like if your imagination could run wild and make the world the best of what it could be, kind of like what the movie Tomorrowland was supposed to be. That movie was so sad to me because it started out with such great promise, and it's just like it just didn't get the ending that it deserved. But the beginning of what that city looks like, that doesn't have the campiness of Tomorrowland 94. It has some kind of thing that to us feels like fantasy because it feels like, humanity's never going to cooperate to that extent to get to that Tomorrowland. So there is a fantasy involved in it, but there's also this hopefulness about it. And I think that fits with Magic Kingdom.
Something you said made me think specifically when you're talking about Tomorrowlands. It made me think of Tomorrowland in Hong Kong, and specifically the Iron Man experience. And I remember when I went to Hong Kong Disneyland, one, how incredibly hot and humid it was, and I'm from Florida, but I remember walking into Tomorrowland, and I didn't stop and go, okay, what's the story here? I was so excited just to go and ride the Iron Man experience. I think that experience for me is representative of probably 95% of guests that come to Walt Disney World. They're not going, all right, hold on, kids. Let's get establishment of place and space. Where's the story? But then when I got into the queue of the attraction and I realized that Tony Stark was recruiting us as guests in Hong Kong Disneyland to fight off these aliens that were coming in to attack Hong Kong, I was like, oh, I get it. I smiled because it all sort of made sense for me in that regard. I didn't necessarily need to be sort of laid on with, like Walt would say, like, you don't have to sort of lay it on with a trowel. What the story is, I got it in that individual attraction. I don't know that I necessarily needed to connect the dots. Well, how does the UFO zone and Autopia and Stitch's Encounter and Buzz Lightyear, how does this all tie in? Because I was just loving the fact that Tony Stark was recruiting me for this amazing attraction.
Well, and I think that's something too for the average day guest, like it or not. And I'm probably going to sorry if you get hate email for this, but Bob Chapek's not wrong when he says that IP is what sets Disney apart. When Disneyland opened in 1955, there were not children's museums in every large city in the country. There were not other theme parks. Today, there is. There are former Imagineers working at some of these places. Taking what they learned and producing it in other cities around this country and around the world. So now, today, what sets Disney apart? And it's the intellectual property that most guests would expect to see when they walk in those doors. So whether that's a literal interpretation like, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor, or a more loose interpretation like Tron Light Cycle Power Run, there's still a connecting point there for people.
You hit on the operative word, expectation. It's what guests are expecting. The average Disney fan that is bringing their family or friends to Walt Disney World is expecting to see characters and experiences from the movies, from the TV shows, and while striking a balance. Look, I think Tokyo does an amazing job at Disney Sea of creating its own IP, and Disney does overall as well. But for the average guests, the things you see on screen and the games you play, you want to experience those things in the park. Remains to this day the foundation of Disneyland. Fantasyland is the center of Disneyland for a reason. Walt wanted you to walk in and have a three-dimensional experience based on the characters and the stories you saw on screen.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that too, because I actually wrote a piece for the blog last year, not long after I had given some time to think about the Dreamer statue that's going to be in Epcot. And I remember I wrote within that piece, because just talking about like Walt's dream for Epcot and what that was intended to be versus what Epcot is today. And I think this is also applicable to Tomorrowland. And I actually asked the question in that piece, like, is it unfathomable to believe that Walt would see the value in using a character like Moana to teach a child about the water cycle and the importance of water, especially now with regards to the environment? I not only don't think that's unfathomable, I think it's likely that he would have done something like that, to leverage characters that have such a massive audience to do the very things that were so important to him or seem to be. I mean, I don't purport to know exactly what Walt thought, but I think you can incorporate IP in very good ways. And personally, if I had my way, one of the attractions I have wished for the last 10 years existed in Tomorrowland is get rid of Stitch's Great Escape and turn that into a planetarium with Wall-E and Eve, where the dancing music, and now with the projection capabilities you have, like you see in Shanghai's Pirates, you could literally project Wall-E and Eve into the middle of that theater, and then they could fly up on amidst the stars. Like, that's my dream attraction for Tomorrowland, incorporating something that I already know and love and teach me about something that I don't know everything about.
Brilliant. That's a brilliant idea. And I love Wall-E so very much. And I think that brings up the interesting point. And maybe this is sort of a jumping off point for you who's listening to be involved in this conversation about what's next. What does the future hold? What does tomorrow hold for Tomorrowland? Do you start to make it that hybrid edutainment type of thing? Is there, and I'm not saying that there is, I'm just sort of, spitballing ideas. Is there now a corporate responsibility to say, hey, we need to sort of leverage these characters, bring them in, create something that's entertaining but educational as well? We need to use Tomorrowland to help teach people in a fun way about the environment. And you can sort of expand or contract that however you like. Is it about a showcase of technologies? Is it a place where you bring in IP, whether it is Tomorrowland futuristic based or not? Assuming that all licenses were available, is it a place for Marvel characters? Right, we're desperate to see Marvel characters eventually come to the park. I believe that deal with Universal will eventually go away. We will see it. Is Tomorrowland a place where, like in Hong Kong, like it takes place elsewhere in other Disney parks around the world, is it a place for Marvel? Is it about science and technology? Is it meant to be a place to showcase current and future technologies? You run into the Tomorrowland paradox once again. Or is it this sci-fi, steampunk, pulpish look at a fun vision of the future? There's no right or wrong answer, right? Everybody's, I think, going to have, and this is such a wonderfully subjective question, which I think invites ideas like yours, which I absolutely love, of what Tomorrowland can be. Maybe it doesn't have to be this sort of cohesive narrative that flows from one building, one attraction to the next, but an overarching theme in which all the attractions within speak to.
Well, yeah, and along those lines, I have high hopes for what the possibility is in Tomorrowland just by looking at what was done in the last year with the Polynesian and the Contemporary, where they took and they respected what has been for 50 years. They incorporated intellectual property and they modernized it somehow all at the same time. I mean, hands down props to all of the Imagineers that worked on those projects, because that's has to be an incredibly difficult balance to achieve. Like you look at the Contemporary, somehow they were able to continue to honor Mary Blair while incorporating the Incredibles into those rooms and maintaining what was, but it all feels fresh and new. And a new guest walking in is, not hindered by those of us who want to see what's old. And our things that we love are not, eliminated or brought down by what's new. And I think that kind of, what was done there, if they can accomplish that with Tomorrowland, I think that would be the perfection. I
agree. And I think this is a fascinating question for us all to talk about. Again, I do go deeper into the history and current-ish state of Tomorrowland on the audio tour of Tomorrowland, which you can find on Apple Music, Spotify, or if you want the files for yourself, you can get it on the WDW Radio site. I will put this question in the Clubhouse on Facebook at wdwradio.com/clubhouse. I'd love to have that conversation there. I would love to hear your thoughts or ideas by calling into the voicemail at 407-900-9391. Let me know what you think tomorrow should look like in Tomorrowland. What ideas do you have? What would you like to see? What would you potentially not like to see? And we'll sort of play a little armchair Imagineering. And certainly please go to the blog over at WDWRadio.com. Kendall has a number of great articles there. I'll also link to past shows that Kendall has been on, again, about unrealized attractions, things you can't believe ever happened, things that were never built, and some things that never were. And I think Tomorrowland, it's so fun to look back at the past and the present and to speculate on what the future might be.
Yeah, I just have to say thank you for letting me have a conversation with someone about this topic.
Kendall has a young child at home, so this is great. This is probably the best daytime conversation. And I think we certainly have some ideas for some other segments coming up in the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the Wally idea. Gosh, I love the Wally idea so much.
Yeah. I love that music. Like that music that plays in that scene of that movie is like a happy place for me. And
bring back Handwiches too.
RCA leads the way, leads the way. RCA leads the way, leads the way.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Question of the Week, where I invite you to test your knowledge of Walt Disney World's history, or see how well you pay attention to the details in what you see, hear, taste, and remember. If you think you know the answer, you can enter for a chance to win a Disney prize package. And this week's trivia contest is once again brought to you by you. And what I mean by that is that as part of the WDW Radio Nation family, you literally help bring every episode of WDW Radio to life every live broadcast from the parks, the contests and giveaways. They are literally all thanks to and because of and for you. And you can find out how you can help the show for as little as $1 per month, plus get cool exclusive rewards every month like scavenger hunts, trivia quests. We do group video calls. You have access to our private Facebook group, shirts, stickers. You can get monthly care packages from Walt Disney World, early access to events, and much more. More importantly, your support helps our Dream Team project, which benefits the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America. Thanks to you, we've raised more than $500,000 for Make-A-Wish to help children with life-threatening illnesses visit Walt Disney World. I also want to thank some new and longtime members of the nation, including Bucky Gaunt, Deborah Fisher, Kerry Lee, Eric Garcia, and Amy Ferguson. To find out how you can help the show, you can visit www.radio.com/support. And before we get to this week's trivia question, we're going to go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So last week I asked you to tell me who or what is Big Bertha. Again, thanks to the hundreds of you who entered, got this one correct, and we're also very creative and very funny sometimes in your answers. And Big Bertha is the organ at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa. And if you go into 1900 Park Fair, which I need to do a live restaurant review of soon, by the way, you'll find Big Bertha, which is an antique band organ built in Paris around the turn of the century. Of course, you're not going to find Big Bertha sitting on the ground somewhere. Instead, you have to look up because she's installed into the wall about 15 feet above where you dine. And Big Bertha isn't just there for decoration. She actually plays music, not just sort of piano music, but drums and bells and cymbals, which were originally played using the old piano rolls. Big Bertha was actually used from about the early 1900s to about 1955 in an amusement park in Grand Rapids, Michigan called Ramona Park. And after that park was demolished in the 50s, the three actually antique band organs were put into storage. They were found in Alabama in the early 60s, restored, and eventually found their way over to Disney's Grand Floridian Resort. And now I'm hungry. Anyway, I took all the correct entries, randomly selected one, and last week you were playing for a WDW Radio pin, keychain, and bonus mystery prize. And last week's winner, randomly selected, is Melissa Beal. So Melissa, congratulations. You used the online form. I will get your prize package out to you right away. If you played last week and didn't win, that's okay, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So this week, I want you to tell me where in Walt Disney World you can find Neptune, or at least a statue of him. Where can you find Neptune? Now you have until Sunday, February 27th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to go to WDWRadio.com, click on the podcast there, use the online form. Again, you're going to play for a WDW Radio pin and keychain, which are available exclusively as contest prizes, as well as a bonus mystery prize. So good luck and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in this and every week. Please share your thoughts about Tomorrowland, its history, its current state, and what you would like to see, or maybe do a little Imagineering of your own, what you wish you could see in Tomorrowland in the future. You can come be part of the community and conversation, not just about this question, but anything in the Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars universe by joining our Facebook group at www.radio.com/clubhouse. You can also connect with me elsewhere on social. I am at Lou Mongello on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you have a question about Disney history or Marvel or Star Wars or vacation planning, you can email me, lou@wdwradio.com. I'll answer it on a future episode, or call the voicemail at 407-900-9391. That's 407-900-WDW1. Please join me this and every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for WDW Radio Live, as I take you with me as we walk and talk in the parks or from the home studios where we discuss this week's podcast, what is new and news in Walt Disney World, my top 5 live, Disney Plus pick of the week, your questions, and more. Please make sure to turn on notifications at www.radiolive.com, as well as on the WDW Radio Facebook page, just to be sure, at facebook.com/WDW Radio. It's very important this week because I am going to be traveling to a Star Cruiser very, very far away. I'm going to get a sneak peek of the Galactic Star Cruiser this week. I'm hopefully going to be able to bring some of that to you live. I don't know. Stay tuned this Thursday, February 24th. If not, also stay tuned on Tuesday, March 1st, as I'll be traveling with Becky Mankin and my family, by the way, on the maiden voyage, the first official voyage of the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. I want to take you with me onto the Halcyon and share as much as I can with you live. If I can't do it live because I don't know what the signal is like in space, I'm also going to share as much as I can in the clubhouse as well as on my Instagram, where I will try and share stories and some photos at instagram.com/LouMongello. Of course, as much as I love connecting with you online, nothing beats a handshake and a hug, so please visit our events page at wdwradio.com/events, as well as our events page at facebook.com/WDW Radio. There you'll find out about upcoming meets of the month, our 3 currently scheduled group cruises, including our August cruise on the Disney Wish, our December Very Merry Time cruise in the Disney Wish, and our April Disney Fantasy 8-night overnight in the Bermudas and Bahamas. Plus, we have lots more coming up, including D23 Expo, some other on-the-road events, a few more cruises, and a few more surprises. Please visit LouMongello.com if I can help you turn what you love into what you do with one-on-one or small group coaching, my Momentum Weekend workshop, or speaking to your event, your conference, or your school. Also, my Momentum Weekend retreat in Walt Disney World is coming up in May. I only have 1 seat left. You can visit LouMongello.com/retreat to find out more. Thanks as always to Becky Mankin and the entire team over at Mousefan Travel, my official and recommended travel provider. It's who I've used and, more importantly, who I've recommended for more than 15 years because I love them, I trust them, and I trust them in helping you find not only the best possible prices and discounts, but because of the incredible personal service that every Mousefan Travel affords their clients. You can visit them over at mousefantravel.com for a free, no obligation quote. And finally, my friend, and you are my friend, whether we have met yet or not, all I ask is that if you like the show, please help spread the word. How? By literally telling a friend or by sharing a link to this or your favorite episode on social. Tag me at LouMongello. It is very, very helpful. And if you can, take just a couple of seconds to rate and review the show over on Apple Podcasts. You can also now leave a quick rating over in Spotify Podcasts as well. I want to thank some recent reviewers like Foreman J14, who says, a Disney legend, thank you, but far from. I found the podcast in 2019 when I was planning a baby moon to Disneyland, congratulations, before our first son was born on November 18th, the same birthday as Mickey and my daughter. 3 years later, 2 more trips to Walt Disney World and we're welcoming our second son, congratulations, and I still listen to every episode as soon as I can. It really is a standout in terms of podcasts in general. The variety of content on one subject is outstanding, and it's clearly the best Disney podcast around. Wow, thank you so much. I have a huge smile on my face. Or the GOAT, wow, as they say nowadays. If you're a Disney fan and or former cast member like myself, very cool, you found your podcast. My husband would say he's a fan. Actually, you're a friend, not a fan. Now, too, thank you for giving us the shared fandom. Foreman J, thank you, congratulations. I sincerely appreciate you. And I appreciate you for taking the time to listen, for your friendship, your support, and for being here as part of this community and this extended family that we share together. I love you. I appreciate you. Please go out and choose the good. Find the good in everybody and everything that you encounter. I promise you, there's some good there and even some of the bad stuff, because if you spread positivity, I promise you that that positivity will spread and you'll not only make somebody else happier, but it will just make you feel better. I promise you. If there's ever anything I can do for you to show my appreciation, please let me know. So until next time, our next live show and next week's podcast, I hope that this truly is your best week ever. See ya.
Hi, Lou. This is Tom Free calling from New York City, and I just wanted to call with an answer to your question. Because of WDW Radio, I have a source of Disney information, entertainment, and community that I know I can trust to be positive and respectful and reliable and consistent. Whether it's on the podcast or live in real time, I know if you, Lou, or one of your guests wants to make a point about something, I know I'll not only get to hear that point made without a lot of interruptions, but also that it won't be infused with negativity or mean-spiritedness or disrespect. And that's really huge, at least to me it is, because a combination of those qualities, it really is a rarity. And even though knowing you, Lou, you'd probably say we're the ones that make it that way. In the end, it's really you, because you're the one who sets the course and the tone. So in that sense, I think you bring out the best in all of us in the community. So thank you a million, and keep up the fantastic work, and happy 15th, Lou. Thanks so much. Bye.
Hi, Lou. I was just listening to your latest podcast. This is Susie from Colorado, and I wanted to answer your question. Because of WDW Radio, I have a greater appreciation for the details in the parks. I love your top 10 reports. And I have a desire to see the parks around the world, particularly in Japan, and to go on a Disney cruise. I love your trip reports as well. In fact, I have a lot of FOMO when I listen to them, but that just makes me want to go to them even more. Thanks so much for all you do. See ya.
Hi, Lou Mongello. It's Chuck Leyenberger calling. I wanted to call and congratulate you and the entire WDW Radio crew on 15 years of just pure awesomeness. I have had the pleasure and the distinct honor of being a guest on this show several times, and, you know, it has been some of the highlights of my Disney experience. You asked the question, please finish this. Because of WDW Radio, I have. Well, because of WDW Radio, I have become a travel advisor with MEI and Mouse and Travel. That would have never, ever happened without you and the entire WDW Radio community. I never would have met Becky. I would never have made all of these incredible friends and had these incredible adventures. And I know many, many, many more incredible experiences are yet to come. So thank you, Lou. Thank you to you, your passion, your dedication, and that of your entire family for providing this incredible opportunity for all of us. So congratulations on 15 years, and here's to 15 more.
Hey, Lou, it's Steve Medina. I wanted to call and congratulate you on 15 years of WDW Radio. I've been a listener since the start, actually since it was Mouse Tunes. So I am one of the, I guess you would call a homesteader or inaugural listener. And I want to thank you for the 15 years that you've given. And to answer your question, because of WDW Radio, I know that I have at least one more person, middle-aged 50-year-old, 50-something-year-old like myself, who geeks out on Disney, and that it is a normal, or maybe not so normal, but definitely acceptable way of living your life. God bless you, Lou, and to 15 more. Bye-bye.
Hey, Lou, it's Steve Medina again. I just wanted to make a suggestion for a show where somebody interviews you to get to know the real Lou Mongello, you know, not just Disney Mongello. Just a suggestion. Take care.